right, live. Okay. All right, we're back from recess. The first item up is item P1.
I move to reject.
Okay. The item is consideration and possible action to approve a legal services agreement between Tarrant County and the Public Interest Legal Foundation. All right, so we have a motion to reject. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion from the court members before we bring up voters, speakers?
Yes. Okay. Yes. I moved that we reject the proposed agreement for these redistricting services because I have profound objections concerning the proposed contract with Public Interest Legal Foundation. This matter demands our utmost scrutiny since its implications extend far beyond a simple contractual agreement. We are discussing the very foundation of our democratic process, the fair and equitable representation of our constituents. I want y'all to be very clear. After the census in 2021, Tarrant County Commissioners Court, led by 5 other individuals, had a full redistricting process. They hired a reputable law firm, Bickerstaff. They conducted a full analysis of the census data to determine the deviations were well within 10%. They were under 2% for every precinct. The court engaged the community and had several town hall meetings. So there was a redistricting process in 2021 at the appropriate time with the most up-to-date census data. And the determination was not to redistrict. The Tarrant County Commissioners Court vote was 4-1 to accept the firm's recommendation to not redraw the lines. So let me elaborate. One basic goal in redistricting is to make sure the 4 precincts are equal in population. Courts have generally accepted that a total population deviation of less than 10% between the most and the least populous districts is considered substantially equal. So, top to bottom deviation would take the most overpopulated district, the most underpopulated district or precinct. We add up their percentage, and if it's more than 10%, the precinct is out of map and unconstitutional, making the county obligated to redraw the lines. If a redistricting plan has a deviation exceeding 10%, it becomes more likely to face legal challenges. So in our case, in 2021, the greatest deviation was 1.0%, nowhere near 10%. And because the commissioners' precincts were so balanced, it was the recommendation of the third-party law firm hired by the county and the vote of the Commissioners Court to not change the lines because the deviation was so low and possible challenges to the map bears that much heavier of a burden of proof as to why this is needed. So can someone, when I'm done, explain to our constituents the logic of undertaking a second redistricting effort? You're wanting to talk about doing 2 redistricting processes in less than 5 years. It's not even quite mid-census. Next and foremost, we must address the fundamental question of legal authority. As members of the County Commissioners Court, our actions are circumscribed by the powers granted to us by the state. Where, I ask, is the explicit statutory authorization for a mid-decade redistricting process? Where is the explicit statutory authorization for a county commissioner's court to conduct 2 redistricting processes in under 5 years? To proceed without clear legal grounding is to invite legal challenges and to operate at the very least in a legal danger zone. We risk not only wasting taxpayer dollars in litigation, but also undermining the public's trust in our governance. We have to be able to defend our actions with clear and unambiguous legal precedent. To be clear, to repeat, there is actually no state statute that authorizes a county to conduct redistricting at all. Tarrant County doesn't possess the authority to redraw the Commissioner's Court map for the remainder of this decade because at the beginning of the decade, the new census came in. We conducted a redistricting process, and the districts were within deviation. Therefore, our map is not unconstitutional as it currently exists. Now, in 2031, go for it. So, let's say my colleagues do vote to conduct a second redistricting process in under 5 years. We need to consider the accuracy of the data upon which this redistricting would be based. The 2020 census provided a snapshot of our county at a specific point in time. And we're now in 2025. Our county has experienced dynamic growth, demographic shifts, and changing community needs and so to rely on outdated data is only going to create a distorted and inaccurate representation of our current population. Y'all want to draw lines based on numbers that no longer exist. This is just not fundamentally sound. It's unfair. We cannot, in good conscience, proceed with a process that is inherently flawed by outdated information. Next, the potential of this redistricting to violate minority voting rights is a matter of grave concern. The Voting Rights Act exists to protect the rights of all citizens, particularly those who have historically been marginalized. Majority-minority precincts formed through years of community organizing and coalition building are essential for ensuring that communities of color have a meaningful voice in our elections. To dismantle these precincts is to silence those voices, to deny them their rightful representation. And then let's examine the firm or foundation or whatever the public interest legal foundation considers itself. The organization exists solely in order to undermine the voting strength of minority voters. If my colleagues support this law firm, they are engaging in intentional discrimination against minority voters, putting this county at risk of more litigation. Did anybody spend any time looking at this firm? If you spend an hour or so online Googling PILF or PILF activities, you'll find a rap sheet of this organization being sued over and over again for their shady, discriminatory practices. But I also think you can take the ruling in Galveston County where Judge Brown, a former Texas Supreme Court justice, a Republican appointee, ran as a Republican, got elected many, many times. Trump appointed him to the federal court. Point being, Judge Brown is nobody's liberal. Judge Brown wrote a long opinion about Galveston County and PILF, and he used a number of adjectives to describe PILF and its practices like mean-spirited, poorly executed. He had a lot of criticisms of PILF's activities in the case. The fact that this law firm has been found to engage in discriminatory conduct is a fact worth pointing out to our constituents. Besides this glaringly not being the right time to redistrict, PILF is just not the right firm. It's not the right firm now, and I don't think it'll be the right firm when the time comes. Their track record is poor. It's going to put the county at risk for having lawyers that have already been found to be discriminatory before. That's a big point. The fact that you guys are trying to hire this firm, that it in itself is an act of intentional discrimination. And if you guys want to ignore the other reasons I've mentioned, why this would be a major error for our county, we have to consider the fiscal irresponsibility. The proposed $30,000 contract will be a mere drop in the bucket. The true cost of this redistricting, including potential legal challenges, will likely run into the hundreds of thousands, if not millions. We are essentially throwing away good money. We know that in 2031, we will be required to engage in redistricting based on new census data. So, do you think it wise for this county to engage in 3 comprehensive redistricting processes in a 10-year process? A period. Initiating this process now is just burning taxpayer money on a redundant and potentially harmful exercise. We have to be wise stewards of these people's funds. We have to be better than this. I'm done.
Any other comments from commissioners?
If I may, Judge, thank you. Simply for me, I have more questions than I believe we as a court have answers. Some of those questions center around, was there a previous discussion about this during court? How was Public Interest Legal Foundation selected? Where did the recommendation come from? Do they have a presentation that we can review to ensure that they are in alignment with the values of our communities? What are the software capabilities to ensure a public map drawing process and technical expertise needed to facilitate the process? Is the firm present? This is a Virginia-based firm, if I'm correct, and I have a significant number of questions based on that. One of them is, what do they know about Tarrant County? We are required to fly lawyers to our community to learn about our community, in addition to the cost of phase 1 of the project. What is phase 2 and how much will it cost? There are so many questions and challenges associated with this proposal for me. Due to the gravity of this situation and the impact it will have on constituents, it's imperative in my eyes that we maximize transparency. Due to changes in federal funding, in my opinion, we should be focused on conserving resources and not replicating a study that was done following the 2020 census. And as a point of record, I'm the only person on this court that was present when the original redistricting was done in 2021, and it was a full process. I have that from personal context and being involved in it. The presentation in October stated that 4 Tarrant County Commissioners Court precincts are imbalanced and do not need to be redrawn. Our resources should not go to replicating an analysis to advance anybody's, and I'm not saying that this is the intent of anyone on this court, any political positions, but to ensure the services impacted by the federal funding cuts continue for our constituents. At this present moment, I'm working with partners that I have in different industries to be able to address some of the potential layoffs that we're going to be having as a result of the federal funding cuts, to ensure that these individuals that we call family members in Tarrant County have a place to land, and that they're not left without any options or any hope. Now, we're not going to be able to place all of these individuals, but I think that we should be putting forth a good faith effort to try to find a place for these individuals to land. We should be talking about that and coming up with solutions on how to address that issue. However, it's based on the public statements of a few of my colleagues that they are determined to make redistricting a priority, and you have that right. I simply ask that we ensure transparency through an open and public process. That's my ask. Specifically, I'm requesting an RFP to identify the firm to facilitate this process. I have nothing against Public Interest Legal Foundation because I don't know a whole lot about it. But it's imperative that this process is inclusive of all taxpayers with the ability to view and add input on maps through a systematic and fair process. Moreover, there is a likelihood that we will exceed the $50,000 threshold that requires an RFP. Therefore, I'm asking to move to table consideration on this topic until a more thoughtful process inclusive of an RFP that is brought to the Commissioner's Court. And just for record, as I was reading through our Melissa's department, I'm sorry. Purchasing. We had several RFPs that were underneath $30,000 that we approved. Why is it that we can't have an RFP process for this that's going to have far-reaching implications on all community members? All I'm asking, colleagues, is that we have a fair and transparent process that is inclusive of everybody, and we give firms that have the experience and expertise the opportunity to bid on this process. Thank you for your time. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you. One thing that you said in there was, you said something like, I moved to table.
No.
There's already a motion on the floor
No.
that you seconded. You didn't mean to move that motion.
No, that's correct.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
Any other comments from commissioners? Anything? Okay. For our public, we're going to get to the speakers now. There